Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Chelsea Robberson, the founder of Lealyn Growth. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath Polycast.
Hey, Dustin, I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. And so this is a show by PolyInnovator. I'm excited to have you on the show because I've been trying to change education and through this modular degree I created. And I'm curious to see what you think about what we can do about changing education as a whole anyways. So please say hello to the innovators and the audience.
What's up, innovators? I'm excited to talk about how we can bring education forward, change it for the 21st century.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast. For sure. That's one reason why we connected too, because your little quote, which we'll get into in a little bit. The way I like to break the ice, so to speak, is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
I'm a pretty, blunt and unfiltered person, so I just don't know. Hang on. Man, something that no one knows about me.
This is one of the reasons why I sent it ahead of time. I usually don't send that part of the show notes.
I know.
But I sent it to you just in case.
And even when I read it, I'm thinking something will come to me. I'm sure. I'm certain that it will come.
Mm-hmm.
I am a typically colorful person. Like, look at my shirt, right? It's always exciting and colorful. But when I go shopping, I pretty much buy black, gray, and white. And so if you look in my closet, it's like black, gray, and white, this shirt, and then any of the shirts that I wear for school. I don't know if that's interesting, but I seem like I would be fun, but maybe I'm not.
Yeah. I mean, there's some points where I'd wear a bright pink shirt or shorts even. I got a pink shorts. And then if you look at my closet, it's the same way. It's just black and gray, black and gray.
I know. Except for my preschool shirts. Like, the shirts that I wear to school are always super fun and exciting. But on a normal day, I'm a pretty boring
you said
person.
Before the call, we have to be exciting for the preschool kids.
That's true. Otherwise, they're like, you're lame.
Yeah.
I don't want to participate.
I'm a swim instructor, and when I was teaching younger kids back in the days, I had to just be overly excited, even if I wasn't feeling it that day, just to get them slightly engaged.
Yeah, but once I raise my excitement, even if I have to force it, then you're like, oh, this is better, and then you're excited anyway. You turn your mood around while trying to engage the kids, so it works out.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and what I noticed too is that when you do that with adults, it actually helps as well.
That's true. My degree is child development, and I tell my dad all the time when I talk with him, this degree, everybody should have it. It's pretty much pertinent to every situation. You can be sitting in a meeting and trying to figure out how to work with everybody and make everything work, and you just use your child development strategies, and suddenly everybody's happy.
Well, and adults aren't as grown up as we think we are sometimes.
It's accurate. This is true.
One of the things I actually talk about before we get into questions, just kind of mentioning this, is that the 4 pillars philosophy I created, where it's like the mind, body, spirit, and emotions, this self-development aspect. There's sometimes that emotional pillar. People don't develop their emotional intelligence enough to where they don't realize that they're overreacting on a certain subject, or perhaps they are getting sad because someone said something that wasn't meant to be rude, but it was perceived as rude.
Oh yeah, I think self-awareness is huge, and that's a big part of what we're missing in education. That we'll get to that, when you get there. But is a holistic view with your 4 pillars, and everything needs to be holistic moving forward instead of trying to break them apart.
Exactly.
Definitely.
So another thing before we start the questions, what was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
So I think that one I can answer. That one's much easier than the previous question.
Yeah.
My mindset 5 years ago. So I was directing at one of the first schools that I was at. Well, the first school I was directing at, and I thought that was pinnacle. Thought, man, I'm directing. We're growing. This is great. I've arrived. This is what I've meant to do. I used to teach my teddy bears in my room, and now I'm running a school. So I've reached all my goals. And so I think my mindset was, I've done it, I'm done, here we go. And it took and then I switched schools and all these other things happened, and now, Corona, and now here I am. And now it's like, man, there are 200,000 miles ahead of me. And so I think instead of 5 years ago, I was thinking, I've arrived, I'm done, this is where I'm going to be. And now it's, man, I don't even want to go back to that. I'm excited about all these things that could happen moving forward. So I have a forward mindset instead of a completed.
And that's good, because life is not about the destination, it's about the journey along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And I like those first two questions here. That's why I usually don't include them when I send the questions over, because I want to be a little bit surprised in there. So that way people get caught off guard a little bit, which technically makes people a little bit more on edge. But then once you open up, it makes people feel more relaxed. Like, okay, I can relax in this environment.
Right.
And that first one, share something about yourself, is much more harder to answer. And then the mindset one's much easier to answer.
It is so hard. It's going to be 1:00 in the morning. I'm like, I thought of a good one.
Honestly, if you just record a scene with the same like background you have there, you could just like send it to me. I'll just paste it in.
Right? This one's better. Put this one in there.
I'll do both and just do the first one, then round two. No, just kidding.
Yeah, right.
Getting to the questions here, starting off with a quote from Matchmaker.fm that I found you by. Education should be built for the 21st century students, not the 1837 factory mindset. Let's move the education forward in a relevant way. Why do you think we've kept this rather archaic factory mindset for so long?
Because, it's what we do, right? I mean, this is what we've always done. It seems to work. Let's move forward, make small changes. But, we don't need to change a whole lot because it's worked up until now. We turned out fine. That's what I hear a lot when I start challenging people on education model as a whole, and their response is, we turned out fine.
Yeah.
Did you?
Did you know? I mean, I did not do well in school because I did not conform to it.
It's like, let's define fine. Okay. So I think it's what we've always done. Mm-hmm. And the change process is so slow. I mean, if you think, you'd have to get it all the way down into the colleges that are educating the teachers that are coming out, and then change the way the teachers are teaching and the way the administration is, all that. And it's a mindset. And so I think, very similar. I was listening to a podcast the other day about, neuropathways and neuroplasticity and all those types of things. And, once you have a habit, your brain just wants to do that without thinking. So you've carved this neuropathway. We do it this way, we do it this way, we do it this way. And you have to intentionally create a new neuropathway to do something different. And it's very intentional, and it has to be over and over and over again. And you have to fight that constant battle, just slide back over to this easy way. Mm-hmm. And I think, one, it's a huge, we've seen, especially in COVID, how big and impactful the education system is. And it's such a huge structure. I think change is hard because if I were to bring it all the way down it's really big. Mm-hmm. It's a mindset issue. And not everybody agrees. Yeah. and we can't move quite fast enough, especially now. Technology is changing so fast. If we're trying to catch up with what we should have caught up with 10 years ago, now we're having to catch up way faster because everything's changing so rapidly.
Well, every couple of years, if not every year. And I talked to someone about accreditation, for example, in college. And by the time the curriculum that they made goes to the accreditation, let alone get into the university after that, it's 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. By the time even just 1 year happened, that education usually is just not as important anymore, if not completely invalid, because the platform's changed. Speaking of like digital marketing, for example. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, you mentioned like the neural pathways. In the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about cues. Yeah, the cues. And so, for example, if you start associating putting on your headphones with listening to a podcast, then it's going to be much more easier for you to listen to a podcast because all you have to do is put on your headphones and your brain's going to be primed and ready to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's a big piece of all of that, is just intentional. You have to be intentional, and people have to agree on things, which is always a challenge.
Yeah, especially in the very divided country that we're in right now.
Yes.
So how can we change that? Or in other words, what can we do? What are some ways we can do so?
Well, I think a lot of it is keeping up with the most recent research, right? Instead of looking back on, here's what we learned in school as a teacher and educator, or here's what we learned at this, it's then switching up to, okay, what's happening right now? Not what did we learn in school 10 years ago? It's what's happening right now. And I think that's really challenging in a way to do that, because again, it takes intentionality, and it takes people seeking after that. And, it takes time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just don't want to put that extra effort into it, but just really seeking after, nerding out on what's next and what's coming and how a child's brain is developing and why we teach the way we do. I have someone that I follow named Ray Pika, and she writes these books called What If We Taught the Way Children Learn? like mind-blowing question, right? I
Right.
mean, so I think we have to take everything back down to, are we teaching in a way that children are really learning and developing, or are we teaching in this way just because this is the way that we teach, and holding that against each other?
Well, and I think going to the regular system that we have right now, it's one of those things where we're trying to teach a standardized aspect of learning. You have to learn this, this, and this. And it's not about
Mm-hmm.
interest. When you're not
Yeah,
interested in learning something, you're not going to do it. I'm a
right.
prime example. I was not interested in learning chemistry in high school, but now that I'm older, I found much more use cases for it. So, like, oh, this actually means a lot more to me
Yeah,
now than it did
yeah.
back then. And so trying to find what people are interested in and trying to teach that often to be more effective.
Teaching uniquely to the student in an individualized manner instead of in a generality,
Mm-hmm.
student focused learning, and then being
Yeah.
able to follow that learner, project based, all those types of things is what's needed to get the children engaged. Otherwise, you're teaching at them. They should be leading the education, and then the teacher or the parent or whoever is coming alongside them as a co-constructor,
Mm-hmm.
and guiding them as they learn, rather than trying to pull them along from the front. And I think our method is, we're going to pull them along from the front, and you're going to learn these things that we know that you need to learn, based on what we've experienced in our past, instead of saying, okay, you are the future, let's come alongside you and teach you how to think critically and learn what you want to learn, and then because they're going to be going into jobs that don't exist.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I created the modular degree, so that could be modular to what the kids need to learn, or adults even in this case as well.
Right.
I don't know if you heard about this, but in Singapore, there's an elementary school where they use an AI to track what the kid knows and changes the kid's curriculum based off of their competency in that area.
That's amazing. And that's what lots of educators in small schools or private schools or places that I've worked with are trying to do. And it's hard. It's hard to be individualized. And so I've seen a lot of cool ed tech stuff come out that is now coming alongside educators in that way to help them individualize and shift. So that's very cool.
Yeah, maybe after recording, we could share notes.
Totally.
So how can we move education forward?
I think kind of what I was saying, it's a big mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the younger generations and even the kids who are in schools right now need to kind of speak up and say, this isn't working. Mm-hmm. Or why are we still doing it this way? I was reading a book called Marching Off the Mat by Tim Elmore, and it's talking about 21st century education and why it still functions the way it does, and those types of things. And I think before, one of the things he brought up in the book is, before, the only access to information that kids had, even me when I was growing up, right, was parents, adults. We couldn't just pick up our phones and Google it, or my girls walk over to Google Home and say, hey Google, what is
it's the headphones. I was making sure the Google didn't go off.
That's what I was thinking, my Google's going to start talking to me. But now, before, they had to get the information from an adult or a library book, right? And now they have so much access to information that we are not the only sources of knowledge anymore. And I think it's an ego thing. We have to let that go and say, okay, we are not their only source of knowledge. And while before every kid might have been growing up to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a veterinarian, now they're growing up to be maybe those things, but maybe a podcast host or this or that or the other, or things that don't exist. And so we have to stop feeling like we run the show, and instead give the kids they need to think critically and come alongside them, so that they can push education forward. So I really think a lot of it is being learner-centered instead of educator-centered or adult-centered, ego-centered. Yeah.
Well, and sorry, those questions that I asked were kind of just rehashes of each other, I guess, in the way. I didn't really realize that when I wrote them, but you managed to answer them differently. So thank you. Those are good answers. And it's one of those things too, where I noticed that there's more polymathic people too. Even if you just go down to the mindset of just having two specialties versus having just one, nanotechnology, biotechnology,
right.
Different people are going to have to start niching down in different ways, because regular specialists aren't necessarily useful anymore, I guess you could say, even in the medical fields. If you're a heart surgeon, you're going to probably work more on the aortic valve than you are going to be on the entire heart. And so it's more hyper specialized versus that kind of thing. And so you're going to have to learn more things. And you mentioned about Google. I grew up with technology. I was lucky from my generation to build a computer when I was 10 and actually have access to Microsoft Office.
Right,
so I would go on Publisher and Docs and Slides and make various different brochures and slideshows when I was 13, 12, just for fun of it.
Yeah.
And so I had an education in digital media that way.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, but that was self-derived. And on top of that, I had no one to teach me at that point. Versus nowadays, you have Google, and Google was around then, but I didn't think about it. Like, I didn't think that was an option really at that point. It wasn't as prominent.
Right.
And so what I think is interesting now too is a lot of companies are actually looking more for the skill of actually Googling really well, learning how to Google essentially.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to research.
Yeah, the ability to research, exactly.
Yeah, that's huge.
When I research my guests, I open up all the links I have for them. I find more links. I try to go with a holistic approach to see every aspect of that person's online presence.
Yeah, I think the ability to research and find the information is a big thing. I mean, critical thinking, being able to go back to that is giant. And just giving a kid a textbook and saying this is your only form of information isn't encouraging that type of research, because they can find information from so many different places and then meld it all together. Yeah.
Well, and kind of on a slight tangent there, sometimes just reading on a screen is different than reading on a book too. Some people can focus much better on the screen because they're more used to it, and vice versa. Some people are better with the physical book because it's more static. There's not as much light or something like that. And so it's just interesting too. Different people have different needs when it comes to learning. So like you said, learner specified learning, not pulled towards something.
Yeah. My oldest daughter loves to read, and her reading level is way higher than whatever her age, I don't know. But she likes those higher level books, but she's always like, I don't like the small print. I'm like, okay, well, listen to them. Yeah. And so she is obsessed with Audible now. She's always walking around with headphones in her ears, and her birthday's coming up. She's like, I want Audible credits. Like, yeah. Okay, you nerd. Yeah. I will happily give you Audible credits. But I think, and people will frown on that and say, well, she's not reading. Well, I mean,
consuming,
she's still having to take it in. She's having to follow the storyline. She still has to repeat what's happening. So, I would challenge back that to say there's not just one way to learn. And you're saying that she has to physically read a book to learn. And I'm saying there's lots of different ways for her to be able to engage in that content.
Well, and for just on another tangent here, my main series, the Omni content, I make it Omni because I want to have it multi-format for different types of learners. I start with a blog post, I make that into a slideshow, I record over that slideshow, make a video, I take the audio out, make a polycast. And so I'm able to have 4 different content types to match for each different kind of learner. Right. It helps people in different ways. And one thing I will say too, there's an app called Scribed, which is kind of like a Netflix for audiobooks, which is kind of cool. So you might try that for her. And there's also Hoopla, which is a library-based one.
Oh, really? I'll have to look into all of those. Yeah. I use Audible.
It's much cheaper than Audible, that's what I was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always a good thing. It wasn't a big deal until, she started using it. She's like, I finished my, 600-page book yesterday. And I need another one. I'm like, we don't have any more credits.
Yeah. Sorry. I've only gotten 2 books from Audible because I was like, I don't want to spend $20 or $7 on a book. Because literally Scribed is like $10 a month or something like that. I don't still use it at this point because I don't listen as much lately. But I got through one of Tony Robbins' books, which is like 11 hours long. It's insane. All right. So you and I both are education nerds. I love that, actually. And I presume that self-education is a big part of your life. And so this is because I see that you're growing your personal brand. So what are maybe some challenges you faced?
For self-education?
Or your personal brand. Either one.
Oh. I hate, what do I hate? I can't think of the word. Self-promotion. I hate self-promotion. I am so not good at it. I've never needed to do it because I've always been associated with a school. And so I would be able to say, this school is really amazing and here's all the reasons why, come hang out with us. And that was easy. Right. But I have a really hard time saying, here's why you should hang out with me.
I'm awesome.
I'm awesome. So that's been really, really hard. And I still am not great at it. But yeah, I mean, that's my biggest hurdle because I hate it. I also hate money. And so that's a struggle also. Yeah. Coming from salary to, having to talk people into paying you.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's been a coach for 8 years, I understand that asking for money is not the easiest thing. Even if you're worth the money, it's sometimes hard.
Yeah.
Like you're like, I don't want to charge someone too much. And
know.
luckily when you do something really well, which I presume that you do, they often just like, no, you're taking this because you've given me a left value. And so you're often worth the value. And once you know that, once you realize that, it makes it easier. And on top of that too, like we mentioned earlier, fake it till you make it, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And practice makes perfect too. The more you do it, the more you just talk about yourself in a positive way and try to provide the value verbally. Like, hey, I'm doing this for you. I'm sharing this knowledge for you. Then you're not really making it about yourself. You're promoting yourself, sure, but you're trying to give them person like, here, take this.
I know. And then I have the, being in the education mindset, I'm always like, just let me help you. I just love you. I just want you to be successful. Here, have all these things, save the children.
Well, just for example, I actually am a personal trainer. And so when I work out at the gym, I'll see people doing stuff incorrectly. And I'm like, oh, I can't. Okay, I got to say something about it. I just can't sit idly by. Yeah.
No, that's a struggle.
There's a book, Jab, 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 Right Hook. It's really good on this subject.
I have not heard of that.
Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah, I'll send you a link later, I think, because it's really helpful for a lot of that. So what really inspired you to change education?
Being in it, I think. Being in it was like, and I've always been in private education. I've done some work for public and charter schools in the form of working with the accreditation company that was working with them. So I've seen kind of the internal workings, super interesting. But I've never actually formally worked in public education. But I was actually thinking about that question the other day, thinking, okay, what is it? Why am I so obsessed with this situation? And I was talking about it with a friend and I was telling them kind of a story and they were like, you did what? I said, oh, is that interesting? Okay. So when I was in 10th grade, I hated school, hated it. Pretty sure I have ADD. I don't know if you've noticed. I don't know what else I have, but I hated it. And I remember calling my mom crying, being like, Mom, please come and get me. I can't. And I wasn't failing. I was doing well. I was in pre-AP classes, by standards. I was a great student and all of that. But I hated it. It was too slow. Yeah. I had 7-minute passing periods. 7 minutes. What am I supposed to do in 7 minutes?
Get there too.
I'm like, I'm done. I'm ready. Class is over. Yes. So I just wanted to run on Cliff Notes and I wanted to do something other than wait around for the rest of the kids to catch up. Anyway, so then I learned this term homeschool. I'm like, what is this? This is amazing. And my mom was a single mom. I lived with her and then my dad lived in another city. So he wasn't necessarily involved in my educational choices. So then I started trying to convince my mom of, well, why don't you just let me homeschool myself? That seems like the thing that we should do. Yeah. And I still don't know to this day why she said yes or what I said or didn't say that made her think that was a good idea. Or maybe she just wanted me to stop calling her all day. I'm not sure. But she finally said, sure. And so she took me, we bought the curriculum, and I finished in like a year and a half and did all the rest of, whatever the homeschool. You just buy the box and you do the stuff in the box. It wasn't a great thing, I would say, but I finished. I was like, praise. I'm like, we're done.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Honduras and taught out there. But I was telling my friend, I was like, well, I dropped out of high school, homeschooled myself and moved to their country. And she was like, well, that is interesting. I was like, oh, is it? So I think that's where my origin story is, to show you how nerdy I really am. That's my origin story.
You know what? That should have been what you said when I asked you what no one knows about you.
Well, people know it, I guess, but not
online.
You people.
Yeah.
That's true.
What do you mean?
People.
So whenever I ask various questions on here, I'm always curious to see what people say. And I thought that was really interesting there too, because whenever I was in high school, just 1 year older than you, I was in 11th grade. My best learning experience was when I went to the school library and burned through the philosophy and world religion section in a matter of months, just a few months. I just went through the entire section, read it all, or most of it at least, because I think there's some books I skipped over. But for the most part, it was self-directed learning. And I wish I had as much self-discipline as you that age, because yes, I read that many books, but that was kind of a rare occurrence all throughout the years. I was never an academic. And had I realized I could have been like you and homeschooled or did some alternative and just accelerated things, I probably would have done better. And that's the thing with school. We don't know those options exist, let alone or even help to do so. I tried taking online courses in high school to try to go at my own pace, but it was so slow. It was painfully slow. And when I grew up and started taking courses online, I realized, oh, you could speed up the videos. Oh, I can learn how to speed read. Or speed up audiobooks. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
I went through a 17-hour audiobook in like 9 hours.
Oh yeah. I listen at 1.5 speed.
I listen at 2.5.
Oh my gosh. Like,
so you have to practice.
My brother listens at 2.
Yeah.
And it's just, I have to just give it to me and then let's move on, because I'm exhausted already by what you're saying.
Depending on what situation what the book is, like how speed it is, I may even go to 3x, but it took me years to get to that point. And so I never tell anybody to go that high. In fact, 1.25 and 1.5 is often really good for at least a year and a half. And then once you get used to it, then you can crank it up.
Yeah. I too mine at 1.5, and I like it there. I mean, I have these little earbud things, right? And so you can never tell that I'm wearing them, but they're pretty much in my ear 100% of the time. Yeah. And there's a podcast or a book or something playing in them all day. Yeah. And then I can just, you'll see me, someone's talking to me and I'll just be like, what was that now? Yeah. Excuse me while I pause my non-existent ear thing.
Yeah. I got some Pixel Buds, which are the same essentially, but it's interesting because listening to things while you're just doing stuff is much more efficient than just watching something. I like watching stuff, but sometimes I just feel like, okay, I need to be doing something else. So when I listen to a podcast or audiobook, I go for a walk or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of cool because like I wouldn't have been able to be such a good learner outside of high school if I didn't know those things existed.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not given as options. And then especially, I think a huge part of what we're missing, going back to your previous question about moving education forward, is letting the parents know that there's options. Is a huge part, because a lot of times they grew up in public school, that's all they've known, and it worked for them, so they send them. And even if their child is not successful and they have the means to do something different, they don't know what that would be. So they leave them there for whatever reason, and it's just a lack of
communication, really.
Yeah. It's someone coming up and saying, you have options.
My mom did take me out for about a year for homeschooling, but that wasn't very successful. My little sister now is actually homeschooled because of the current situation in the world. And I would honestly argue that being homeschooled right now is way better than trying to do online learning or going back to school in person.
Yeah. My oldest is homeschooling right now. She's done public, private, and charter. And all of them were fine, but none of them were great. And because I'm super picky about education, that's a problem for her. She has more of an issue. But this year was kind of a perfect opportunity. And so for her, she's a high level learner. She was in GT programs or whatever, which I hate that label, but she's just a high learner and she's very self-driven. And so what I did for her was we set her up with a Trello board and said, here's the things that you need to make sure you complete each week, and the rest of it is up to you. How you manage your time, as long as you're managing your time, how fast or quick you complete it, how you choose to research the project, those types of things are all up to her. So she has, over this time, she sets her own schedule, she plans her own week, and then she completes it. She asks questions, and then we change it. She'll come and say, I didn't like this at all. Like, okay, well, how can we fix that? And so for her, the education that I want her to have is more the ability to look at it, plan it, think critically, change when it's not working, ask questions, and all of that, more than learn how to do division.
Yeah.
Because she gets that, but the rest of it is the best part.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want from the modular degree, actually. I cater more towards people my age, or a little bit more towards the college age, or people in any age trying to pivot careers, kind of more the adults. But I do think that this could also apply towards K through 12. I just don't know how exactly it'll fit in just yet. But the whole point is to change things when it's not working. I didn't even realize I did it. When I was pursuing my own modular degree, I started out with entrepreneurship and sustainability because I wanted to work more in smart city development. Then I realized that as a content creator, I need to learn more about podcasting and omnichannel marketing and content repurposing, all these interesting areas. And so I actually changed what I was learning. I didn't actually document that, which is my fault. I should have documented it more. But I didn't realize that my modular degree changed with my needs. And that's a perfect point as to why I made it, so that it can be modular like that, and like your daughter's doing.
Yeah. And that's what she wanted her focus for the year for her to build a business.
Oh.
I'm like, cool. So that's what we're doing. And she's building a business. So in the midst of that, she's learning about marketing and ROI and budgeting and this and that, right? She was invited to be on another 9-year-old's podcast, which was
Oh my
she was
gosh,
so
yes.
excited to talk about her business. She's building a website. She's doing all those things. I mean, and so to me, if I were to build a perfect education, it would look something like that. It sounds like what you're doing with yours is that she is in control of it. She comes to me, I'm there, we ask questions, and of course I monitor it. She can't just watch YouTube all day.
Yeah.
But, for example, right now she wanted her project to be on dragons and medieval stuff, right? So she has to do a presentation of what she's learned, and she's making a cake that looks like a dragon or something, and she's building a dragon city in Minecraft. And then she'll use that as her presentation to me tomorrow, right? And so to me, you can write an essay, or you can let them do something that they really like that they'll remember because it hits them from all kinds of different angles.
Yeah, much more like actually deep memory implantation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's interesting too with the whole starting a business. How old is she?
She is 10.
That's when I started my first business, actually.
Yes.
So that's perfect. I sold temporary tattoos.
That's awesome.
And
she's making bath bombs and she's
perfect.
selling herbs. Yeah.
On Etsy or something like that?
Well, she is working on, she's selling herbs. So she's having to grow them, and then she dries them, and then she packages them. So she's kind of in that beginning phase, but I think she's wanting to do Etsy, and then she's building her website.
That's cool.
We'll see how it goes. What could go wrong?
Yeah. I mean, hey, it's a learning experience nonetheless.
That's right.
Like I said, that was around the age where I was just playing around with Microsoft Office, and I learned so much about design, eye for color, eye for typography, stuff like that. And so just the things she learns from there, even if it's not successful, will help her in later jobs down the line.
Oh yeah. She's learning skills that are huge, and then she'll learn to divide, in the middle of all that while she's trying to count her money.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
So how was it for you teaching internationally?
Well, people are like, you speak great Spanish? I'm like, no. I could talk to the 4-year-olds, and I could tell the taxi driver to take me home. Like that was pretty much it. So when I first went over there, I was living in an orphanage. And so sometimes I start that conversation wrong, and I say I lived in an orphanage in Honduras, and people are like, you're in Honduras, an orphan? I'm like, no. Do I look like a Honduran orphan? I'm just not sure. No, but I lived in an orphanage for boys, and they were anywhere from, our youngest was 2 and our oldest was 18 before they go, and it was actually on a farm. And so I lived out there, and as you can imagine, public school in Honduras, especially in this area, is not awesome. It's not great. So they would go to school and they would come home, and then I would work with them. So I was kind of in charge of building a curriculum for each of the children that were there and working with them on what their needs were. So kind of like tutoring, I guess. And there was also a little boy, Carlitos, who was 2 at the time, who has cerebral palsy. So I worked with him some. So that was really fun. And then the hitman came. So that wasn't fun, but I'm sitting in the house with Carlitos, who's the youngest, and everybody is out working on the farm or gone. And these policia pull up to the house, and I'm like, I don't know I'm going to take Carlitos, and we're going to hide behind this wall. And there's no doors, just concrete walls. And so I'm hiding behind the wall with Carlitos going, shh, for the love of God, do not speak. And so we're sitting there, and they come in the house with their machine guns, and they walk all around. They're asking, where are the white people? Where are the white people? And I'm like, there are no white people here. And so they leave, and they go out to the farm, and the farmers were like, no, nobody's here. They're all gone, whatever. Anyway, so then the farmer came in and was like, are you okay? Because those were hitmen, and they were coming for the white people. I'm fine. Don't I look fine? I'm fine. So other than that part, it was great. So I lived there for a while, and then I went and moved into, that was on top of a mountain in a place called Seguanapeque, which is a really beautiful place. I was there for a while, and then I moved down into the city Comayagua and taught at a school which actually still is there called Ruach International Christian Academy. And I worked with like the kindergarten and first grade classrooms, and just was kind of as a teacher's aide and made sure the kids had what they needed. And it was an English immersion school, which was great for me because I didn't know Spanish, and just kind of helped as much as I could there. And then I ended up having to leave because there was a taxi strike taxi
Oh,
driver strike, and they kind of had to get everybody out. But the school was surrounded by concrete, like 8-foot concrete walls and barbed wire. And we had a
wow.
big steel door and a guy with a machine gun at the front. And so I'd be walking into school and be like, hey, machine gun guy, can you let me in?
Yeah.
But it was a great experience because I love seeing things from other perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
If we only ever see it one way, then we're never going to be able to understand why anything should be different or is different or whatever. And so that was really great. Man, it was hard. I didn't realize how unprepared I was emotionally to be away from my family and in a different country and, have hitmen and whatever. But it was a great experience to see education in all kinds of different ways.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting experience too, where you have to experience something in a different country, knowing where you're at and knowing the societal norms are different too. And on top of that, being able to teach something in a different language too. I grew up with Spanish, and so having Spanish around the household made it easier to learn, but I've learned other languages too, and that difficulty of learning something new like that and having to be immersed in it.
Yeah, luckily the orphanage and the school were both English immersion.
Oh,
so they had to learn.
Yeah.
And I could, speak English, but I picked some things up. But still, and the dialects are so different everywhere you go because the Spanish I learned here in school was useless when I got to Honduras. So it was interesting.
Well, and I've learned in school, I've learned at home, and with immersion, I've also learned with Duolingo. And I found that Duolingo comes a close second to immersion, which is interesting.
Yeah. Technology, man.
School didn't do jack for me.
No.
I took years of Spanish and it didn't help. So as education leaders, how can we clarify our message and increase our impact?
So that is when I work with schools and things like that, that is the question that I go in asking is, what is your real goal here? And they're like, well, we want to educate children. Cool. Break that down for me. What does that mean? You want to educate them in what? In the hard knock life or chemistry? Like, what is it? And so we break that down and talk about what it really looks like to do a holistic education. And I think that's the biggest part of it is going into it with, we know that we want to do this holistically. We know that we need to support the child socio-emotionally. We know that their behavior is communication. We know that to support them academically, they need to have a strong foundation of relationship with whoever's working with them. We know that to encourage resilience in a child, the number one indicator of positive resilience in children is a strong, positive relationship. Is the educator that person? Are they close to that person? Do they even understand what it means to create a safe environment? So I think aside from all the things that people are focusing on, like what's the thing we have to fill in the dots? The little standardized testing.
Oh, yeah.
Aside from like standardized testing and, being able to mark the boxes on assessments and attendance and seat time and all these like ridiculous notions that people are focusing on, instead we need to focus back on, we're teaching a human, like a tiny human that has emotions and feelings and all those types of things. And I don't know that I answered your question because I got off on a tangent about holistic. What was the question again? How
can we clarify our message as education leaders? But you did answer the question. You were asking about like, how can we break it down more? I think that satisfies the answer. And so I always try to do really good at active listening, which is hard for me because I'm a talker. But one of the ideas that I suppressed while I was listening was the fact that when I talk about the modular degree or modular education platform that I'm making, the idea that I want to change is that I want to change how we approach online education. That is the message that I want to convey, so to speak. And that's the impact I want to have. But I don't know how I could break that down farther and explain it more effectively.
So what was it? What was your mission?
To change how we approach online education.
So how do we approach it currently?
MOOCs. Like that's literally the biggest thing that we do online. Just literally just in a linear order, watch these modules, read these papers, and that's it. So in video games, here's an example of what I mean. In video games, let's say Spider-Man, you have these skill trees, and skill trees have become really prominent in most games, even if they don't need them, so to speak. But it's really interesting because when you progress in the game, you get experience, and you could use those experience points at various different aspects in those trees. Usually you have 3. So in Spider-Man's case, you have web slinging, you have chemistry, and you have combat. Okay, cool. Well, each time you level up, you can put 1 point in one of those different areas, and you pursue these trees and different pathways, and you jump between them. You have this unique character that you developed over the time of your play, and it makes a much more enjoyable experience. I wanted to take that gamification concept and apply it towards education. So instead of having a linear MOOC, you're having a skill tree based MOOC. So you have, let's say, building a house. Well, you need to know carpentry. You need to know how to do the blueprints and understand the structural foundation. You need to have electrical wires and that kind of thing. And so those 3 different areas you need to know. Well, maybe electricity interests you more. You learn about the currents. You learn about where these circuit breakers need to be and that kind of thing. And or maybe you want to learn more about carpentry first. And so you just pick your different places down the building a house MOOC, so to speak. And you have to choose which place. And when one doesn't interest you anymore, you can switch to another one. And by the end of it, you have more interest, you have more focus, and you complete it faster.
Yeah, I mean, project-based learning.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a focus and then you can stem out in the spider webs and all of that. And I think gamify education should be, a whole slogan.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, because video games do it better.
Yeah.
Video games do project-based learning better than, whatever website people are trying to learn off of. And so I think that is a perfect picture of that, right? We know the goal and we know some of the tools we'll need to get there, but how we use the tools and the path we use to get to that goal shift with each child, and they're all going to do it differently. It is not linear. It's very dynamic. And so that is a great picture of it, I think. We should all learn like Spider-Man.
That's great. It's one of those things too, where whenever you are trying to learn something and you're more interested in it, like you're saying, having that gamification allows you to have the opportunity versus with MOOCs, you can't really jump around as much. I actually took a MOOC where they wanted you to jump around, but it was still linear due to the learning management system that they used. It was a great tool. And if you jumped around, they did a really good job at making it modular enough to, like, if you did jump around, you wouldn't have as much issue with it. But it was still better to go straight in a row, because that's how the learning management system evolved for it. And I've looked at all the different options: Blackboard, Canvas, Tutor, LMS, all the WordPress stuff, and none of them really can do anything I'm trying to create, which is why I'm like, okay, I need to make my own.
Yeah. Make a video game one. I think we need to steal some of the really good video game designer people and get them into education and have them start setting up this, gamified education thing. I was listening to this book called Dream Park. Have you heard of it? It's a fiction book. I mean, it's from like the 80s. And it's interesting because they have these game masters that come in and build this game, and it's set in like 2050 something. And it's actually the gamers are implanted in this dome, and then it's all kind of created around them. And so, those books, those pick your own path books where you can read and then you went, right? It's kind of like that. And they video it and then they sell it as books and whatever. Anyway, and so the lore master, I think it's called, is the person leading all the gamers, and then the game master. And the game master will build this whole experience, and then the lore master has to take from the clues and whatever and get to the end. And I was listening to it thinking that could be a framework for education, right? I mean, you go in and you build this, and then how this person experience it, much like a video game or my nerdy book, is specific to that person. It's not about the game master or the educator. It's about the person that's experiencing it, and they don't have to get to it just one way. They can go through it however they go through it and still get to the goal, whatever that goal was. But I think the big problem, like you're talking about, especially in digital education or online education, is they're having to follow these LMS systems that only track data one way.
Yeah.
And if they can't prove data one way, then it doesn't count.
Yeah.
And that's a big issue. So you're going to fix that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that reminded me of what D&D is like. I never really liked role-playing games as much like that, because I even though I'm imaginative, I never felt like that entertained me enough. But I know a lot of people really enjoyed it, and it definitely helps with spatial awareness. You have to imagine things, and so when you practice the brain, the neuroplasticity that way, you actually get better spatial awareness. You get better at certain cognitive functions as well. And video games have hand-eye coordination, spatial awareness too. In fact, it's interesting how when you're playing a game for so long, you learn the map around you. And just like in real life, you explore an area, you're going to learn it. I can go around my entire city in my head like a Google Street View. It's insane. I don't know how I can do that, but it's because I've experienced it so much.
Yes. And I think I did a little post on my LinkedIn a while back about we need screens right now. And people are coming out and attacking I mean, you're staring at a screen or you're doing this and screens are awful and technology is the devil and blah, blah, blah. Well, that's just, yes, there is a line, no, I don't think that children should be staring at screens all day, especially young children, blah, blah, right? But this is our future. I mean, our future is technology, and the kiddos need to know how to use it and how to engage with it, how to have a healthy balance. And if we're just keeping them from it and telling them that it's evil,
right,
then they're never going to be able to engage with it in a healthy way. And so I'm all about gamify education. You need to build all those things and take over the world.
Speaking of screens, I have 3, mind you, and plus that one back there. But the thing is, you got to be smart about it. And mind you, I haven't been that smart about it lately. I haven't been doing this, but on my bookshelf right about there, you can see it on the screen. I might cut this off, so I'm not sure if people can see it or not. There's a little shelf there. On that shelf, I have these screen glasses where all it does is cut out a lot of the blue lights, making the eye strain much less. And growing up, moms always say, don't stand in front of that TV for too long, you'll go blind.
Don't stand too close.
Yeah, you don't go blind. That's the studies have proven that false, but it does cause eye strain, and that's harmful. The other thing is, if you know certain things about your screen or your computer, you can actually make it easier for you. Sure, the glasses help, but there's a tool called Flux, and I know a lot of phones have this built in where it's a red filter, so at night it gets rid of a lot of the blue. And there's also curved screens. Curved screens are actually more the curvature of your eye, so it's less eye strain. My main screen here is not very curved, but it is curved, and it helps with that eye strain.
Yeah, I mean, I have Flux on my computer, and then I have all the apps on my phone, and then my actual glasses that I use to, read have blue light filters in them. Nice. So do my sunglasses and all of that, which I didn't know that was a thing, so I was super excited. And then my girls have blue light filter glasses.
Perfect. So you're being smart about it too.
Oh, well, a little nerdy. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even just a couple questions ago, I said we're both education nerds, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
So kind of pivoting a little bit and kind of going more towards the theme of the show, the multidisciplinary people. I find that many people in my audience, the multidisciplinary, have a hard time in school because of their vast interests. They make them seem unfocused at the outside perspective. And in some cases, the lack of conformity even gets them medicated in the case of ADD people too. And in fact, I don't usually talk about this much, but when I was younger, my grandma actually helped me because they thought I needed to be medicated. They thought since I wasn't focusing well enough, maybe I had ADD or ADHD. Right. And my grandma was an MD, and she was like, no, let's not do that. And I'm grateful for that because I think I would have come out differently and not as successful, in my opinion. So what do you think you can be done for these divergent, polymathic, and kinesthetic learners?
Well, I think one is when someone is looking at a child and saying this child is ADD or ADHD because they're not focusing, I think you look at the environment first, not the child, right? I mean, what's that thing that if a fish can't climb a tree or, whatever that thing is, right? I mean, if the flower's not growing, you change the environment. You don't punish the flower kind of thing. And so I think that's a big part of it. And so there's so many kids that don't bloom in this structured traditional education system, and instead of looking at the system, we're saying, oh cool, we'll just medicate the child. And I feel like I probably would have been medicated had that been as big then. My brother definitely would have been medicated then, and even my daughter, because she's in a different school now, but if she were in public, that would be kind of where they wanted to go with that. And so I think actually when he first reached out to me, I was like, Polymath, I feel like I should know what that means. So I Googled
a lot of people
it.
tell me that. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I need to Google this word. And that's totally a great descriptor for me and a lot of people in my family, based on how I understood it, was that you have kind of a wide information understanding, a lot of different interests, but not terribly deep in too many things. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. I don't want to give too much of a detail because it's kind of related to the next question I have, but a polymath is more deep. So having a wide without deep is more of a jack of all trades or generalist, but polymaths are like specialists times like 3 or 4. So you have deep level knowledge in multiple different areas. Okay.
So for me, and that was a great kind of thing for me as I was trying to figure out. And I think one thing that's important for people that live with this terrible disease I'm making it sound, is to be an advocate. To be an advocate for yourself and to understand this is how I learn, this is what I need, and then push for it. And that's what I work with my daughter who homeschools, and then my other daughter who's actually in private school, is to be able to push back and in a respectful way say, I understand what you're saying. I really, 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 really cannot work well within this system that you've given me. Is there another option? And then having that conversation. My 8-year-old is doing it with her reading teacher, who is trying to get her to work within this learning platform that she hates and doesn't move fast enough for her. And it's constantly failing. And by the time gets it all loaded up, right, she's already to her amygdala, no joy or executive function is left, and she's not going to learn a darn thing. So she, at 8, is reaching out to her teachers and saying, this is not the way that I'm able to learn this information. Can you help me find another way? So I think that's a huge piece, is being able to advocate respectfully for yourself to whatever situation, whether at work or school or whatever, because there's always another way to learn, to get to another piece. It just depends on if that person who's in charge of it is willing to work with you. But being able to respectfully and intelligently present your case, I have found for myself in my work environments, has always helped in some way for me to be able to say, I know this is the project that you want me to complete. I know this is how you want me to complete it. But if I can complete it this way, I'll get it done 2 times faster, and the results will be this much better. Just trust me, and we're able to kind of find a middle ground in that sense. So I would say advocating for yourself is a huge
and communication at that point, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
I noticed that
totally.
there's a couple of teachers in high school that I'm thinking of. Thank you, Mr. Boland, if he's listening in on this, where like they just were able to pick up on the fact that I wasn't learning the way that they were wanting me to learn, and Mr. Frizzell as well, actually. And it's just one of those things where whenever they would notice that, they were like, okay, go ahead and do that. Because there was one book, for example, we had a book project, and I was like, I really don't like the options here. Like, I don't feel interested in any of them at all. And I think that he allowed me to read a different book, and I was able to go to the library in the middle of class and go pick out a different book, and I was able to read it much more effectively.
Yeah. And that's what, like I was saying with my 10-year-old who's homeschooling, she's able to come back and say, man, I really don't I started this book. It's awful. Please don't make me read this, and the traditional response would be, no, this is what's in the curriculum. You have to do this to be able to take the test. And what's great about homeschooling her is I'm able to say, if you can intelligently present with me why you don't like it and what you want to replace it with and how you'll kind of achieve the same goal, then sure, let's have the conversation. Because I don't let her say, I just don't want to read it, I don't want to do it. That's a lazy issue.
Yeah. So a counterpoint to what we're saying, kind of being devil's advocate, is that there is a point of laziness. People are inherently lazy to a certain degree. And so our bodies don't want to actually exude energy. That's the whole, it's conservation of energy, so to speak. And so when there's things we don't want to do, even if we secretly do want to do it, we'll try to find an easy way out. And procrastination is a big example of that. But, and so there is a certain point where schools teach a little bit of grit, like when you don't want to do something, forcing you to do it anyways. But when you're forced to do that constantly, especially with things that you are just sort of like, you want to do it, but you just don't want to do it this way, then that's not grit. That's just being forced to do something you don't want to do.
Yeah. That's conformity. Yeah. Right. I mean, so there has to be a balance between, we're not always going to get to do exactly what we want. There's going to be times we're going to have to read the book that we didn't want to read. But I think if you're able to present your case intelligently, that so often can, and not just point out the problem. That's one thing, is you can't just say, I hate this book. It has to be, I hate this book. Here's why, and here's my proposed solution. Here's how I can still complete this task, or whatever that is.
Well, and again, there's books like Shakespeare where people aren't going to want to read them. Like, this is too hard, I don't want to read it. And that's avoidance of difficulty, not avoidance of the book itself. And then once you read it, even if you don't understand it right away, once you read it though, you're like, oh, I enjoyed that. Romeo and Juliet was a really weird book, but I enjoyed reading it at the end.
Yeah. And then taking in those new things and learning something different outside of your comfort zone. I mean, like we said, it has to be this balance. It has to all kind of balance. And I think a big thing is, especially for kiddos that I've worked with, is if they understand why that they're learning it, or they need to know this, or need to read this book or whatever, then they're more likely to get on board with it. Instead of just saying, you have to do this, say, here's why we're reading this, and here's what we're looking for, and here's what we want to, the end goal, then they can get on board with that instead of just saying, you have to do this.
That's an interesting point too, because when I'm a personal trainer, sometimes I don't tell the end goal, because sometimes explaining the end goal to the students doesn't actually help, because then it just distracts them, and then they're like, well, I don't know. It's just a certain matter of grit involved, whereas like if I tell them the end goal, it's just a waste of time, because it doesn't actually tell them anything. It's the fact they need to discover it themselves. So I don't know. That's it's a weird point there, but All right, going off of that, something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
Well, since you already gave me the answer.
No, don't use my answer. Use your own devised answer.
Well, I mean, so the way that it personally resonates with me, I guess, would be that when someone will say, hey, what do you do? And I'm like, that's hard because, and I was even having this conversation yesterday, was I have kind of multifaceted, things that I want to do. And what's really hard is trying to market what it is that I do, because I have the capability, understanding, or the experience to do several things when it comes to education in school and those types of things. So for me, it looks like I can walk into a school and work with operations and strategy, right? And help you build those internal processes, even when that comes to technology and systems and CRMs and whatever. Or I could walk in and train your team and work with your team on how to engage with students and make sure that we're building a safe, secure environment, right? And I can go really deep in that space. Or I can come over here and advocate for trauma-informed learning spaces and holistic education and those types of things. And so to me, I guess my understanding of polymath based on the answer that you gave me would be that concept, right? I have these 3 different areas for this specific spot that I can go pretty deep in. And that's hard for me to figure out where to go with that. But I don't know. Is that right? Did I get an A?
Of course, you got an A+. I don't care if we don't do A+ in all the states. So you got an A+. No, and that's the thing where I was like, don't use my answer. I want your answer. What is a polymath to you? And so I think you actually answered it really well there. You gave me your heartfelt answer, not necessarily the textbook definition. I've seen textbook definitions. I even made my own documentation on my website. I might have put that on my profile. I'm not sure, but essentially documenting what polymath means. And the thing is, it's not about what it means to the general public, because people think polymath is a jack of all trades, which I told you earlier is not true. It's a different level. But to you, polymathy means multifaceted. It means having these different interests. And what I actually would say is I'm building this multidisciplinary spectrum. I'm creating this actually content series about it, where I made a chart explaining where all these different terms, jack of all trades, specialist, polymath, all fit in. There's one term called the niched polymath, where you're a polymath. You're still expert in many different areas, but those areas are still kind of built into one. So for me, PolyInnovator, polymath of innovation. My niche polymathy is innovation. For you, it's education. So you're a niche polymath in education, where you have operations and systems and overall macro and micro thinking, but you don't necessarily go beyond education very much. But at this point, now you're doing podcasts. Now you're a content creator. So now you're actually expanding past education a bit. Yeah. Well, and one thing I often try to talk about too is the way you approach polymathy. Is some people think you can do it all at once. Some people think you have to do it one after the other. I'm a bit of a party in both, where you can do both. It's just doing it all at once is hard. And you have to really be strategic about it.
Yeah, totally. I think definitely. But if you have ADD, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's why I don't knock off the idea of doing it all at once, because some people have that divergent attention, and you need to have the changing of interest, because if you maximize your focus because you change different interests over time, that's fine. But that means that you're going to do better at progression. I care about progression. I don't care how you do it. I just care that you're making progress. And so if you're making progress in this jar, this jar, this jar, then this jar, 1% here, 1% here, 1% here, or no, 2% in each one, versus doing just one thing over and over again. And instead of doing 2%, you're only making 1% progress. Well, that's slower. And you're trying to pursue 1% progression that way. Well, that's not going to make you go very fast. But if you're doing 1% spreading it out, you're going to go twice as fast.
Yeah. And I found that now that I'm not in my director role, I'm getting to work in these different spaces. I'm doing some ed tech work and some, government education work and some of my own work, some of this and that, some of that. And I love being able to bounce between projects, because by the time I get bored or overwhelmed with this one, I'm like, okay, and I can move to the other one. But I'm also getting to do like some technology pieces, some research pieces, some, content creation pieces, some curriculum, and so getting to jump between all those different things has been interesting.
Yeah. Well, and just trying to pick your brain too, what do you think could be a polymath education?
I think project-based education is kind of the closest that you'll get to that. I mean, you had talked about it before, some with the Spider-Man analogy and some of those other ones is knowing the destination and then being able to jump around and get there in different ways allows for that type of flexibility. And so I think project-based is going to be one of the best education styles to meet the needs or the interests of someone who is a polymath.
Interesting. And so what is something in the education field that you haven't seen being done about yet that should be done?
I've actually seen a lot of really cool things being done, and especially during this time when I've been able to chat with all kinds of different people. But I think what's really missing is maybe not that it's not being done, maybe that it's not being grown or marketed well or scalable, those types of things. And that's the biggest thing that I run into is when I find ed tech companies or private schools or someone who are doing amazing things, but they are educators, right? So they do these amazing things, but then when it comes to building it out, to making it scalable or marketing it or being able to clearly say what they're doing and why they're doing it, how they're doing it, that becomes more of a challenge. And so they're doing these great things, but they can't get past this initial barrier for growth or whatever, because they're educators. They just want to love the children, and make everybody happy and let's learn and grow together. But those pieces that for growth and really multiply your impact is a big thing that I always talk about, is what's missing. And so I guess my answer to that would be not necessarily that there's something that's not being done, because I think in many different places, in many different ways, there's pieces of it everywhere. It's more that how can we take these, rebel educators and propel them forward? And if I were to pick a dream role, it would be to partner with these rebel educators and figure out how to move them into the forefront and take alternative education, rebel education, and make it more of a commonplace instead of, somewhere in the background that no one really knows about.
Yeah. That's actually interesting, because that's the approach I take to these polymaths. I see all these little pockets of polymath throughout the internet, on Reddit, on Facebook, on different platforms. And what I'm trying to do with the Polycast and with also a tribe that I made too, is try to unite everybody together. I'm trying to interview each one that I can find, let alone the leaders of those groups too, the people who made them, and try to unite them. I think it's the same thing there with the education piece. Maybe that's your next goal there, is to unite all these different rebels together.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It'd be interesting too if we could try to combine their answers to these problems. And we mentioned earlier, you and I both don't like the monetization aspect behind what we're doing, but it is very important. What I focused on first was marketing and learning how to create content and actually get the word out before I even started learning about monetization. So I think that if we can keep doing this content creation, you and I, with podcasting and doing blog posts and doing various different LinkedIn stuff as well, since LinkedIn's such a prolific platform, that would be a good way to get the word out. That is interesting, because we're doing things, it's just we have to access them in a way. People don't know.
Right. Yeah, people don't know about it. People don't know, and that's where it's really a challenge, is helping people become aware with it. And, how you're bringing it. One thing I like about marketing in concept is that it's psychology based. I mean, you have to understand who you're talking to and how you're talking to them and all those things, right? And I'm not a pro marketer. I don't know all the terms for all those things, but I have found that when I walk into education related businesses or schools, I'm able to provide insight into how they're marketing or what they're saying, because I understand that field and the audience and those types of things. And that's what I really like, is to go in, clarify what they're doing. And I worked with a school a while back, and their enrollment grew by like 47%. And they kept saying, thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Chelsea. And I'm like, listen, all I did was take what you were already doing and say it louder and say it louder. You didn't change anything you were doing. I didn't make you better. I just said it louder.
From what I've seen from you, Chelsea, too, is that you're kind of taking that Simon Sinek start with why, and you're helping people clarify what their why is. And so when they speak it to people, it actually resonates with them more. And then all you have to do is teach them how, which social media marketing, podcasting, whatever. And then beyond that, just providing the what, which is the product.
Which people are already doing.
Yeah. They're starting from the bottom up, though, which is why they're failing. You got to go from the top down.
Right.
It's interesting. So how can we set more strategic goals?
I think having that, knowing your why, looking back at your vision board, and then figuring out who you've already served. Listen, I've already served these 150 kids. One of the schools that I work with have been open for 20 years. Okay. And they had a very poor, I would have never enrolled my kids there based on what I understood from them, from the knowledge, from the outward facing piece. Right. But once I got in there and talked with them, they were great. They were awesome. And no one knew. And so I think setting that goal is just, and I deal with the same thing as self-promotion. You have to own that you're doing something great. Know that you're a bit of a rebel, but just, you got to go with it. And I think people don't want to create waves, or maybe they don't want to say, you know, we could do education better, you know, because they're lovely people. And what I want to go in and say is, you're doing education better. Now tell people.
Yeah.
Say it out loud. Own it, because you have all these you have all of these case studies of what you've already done. Now, if you want to multiply your impact, go find the people who need it, because there are people who need it. Yeah. And that's, you know, I just want to save all the people. Yeah. All the children. The older people are less mine.
Yeah, older people, whatever. But ironically, that's my clientele, so I probably should be careful. No,
be careful.
Yeah. Well, for my day job, at least, not for necessarily the Modular Degree. But it's interesting, too, because whenever you market yourself, it's often clarifying your message like you're doing, then identifying the persona, then targeting your message of what your why is to that persona and changing the words to what that persona would resonate to, and then being able to convert them to the next step, which is probably signing up for whatever service you're providing, whether it's free or not, and then pushing from there. And that's where actually that book I mentioned earlier, Jab, 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 Right Hook, comes in. Because what that whole premise is that a lot of people who are marketing are just throwing these right hooks left and right, just pow, pow, pow. And it's trying to like, hey, come join my course, come sign up for my newsletter, come buy this product. And they're literally just right hooking these people left and right. I keep saying left and right, it's a right hook. I don't know why I keep saying that. But they're just keep throwing out these right hooks, and people aren't biting because they're not like, they're getting sold to from multiple different companies everywhere else. They don't care. But when you throw these jabs out like, hey, here's a free message about what I'm doing. Here's a free concept that what I'm doing here. This is like the 3 secret steps that I teach. You learn this. It's literally what I teach you in my course, but you just have to learn from here. And these jabs are really helpful at actually getting the point across. And the thing is, you might be giving away your information for free, but not everyone's going to be seeing it. And the people who do are going to be so grateful that they're actually going to want to know more. And so in your course, you expand upon it.
Oh yeah, I did a marketing consultation with this guy that I met on LinkedIn named Jason Vana, and he kind of has the same concept. He pretty much says, I give away everything that I do for free, right? I will give it to you. And where he gets his clientele is people will get it, they'll start out, they'll get overwhelmed and be like, Jason, I need you, which makes sense. And so my end game is not to be a marketer. I don't want to be a marketer. What I want to do is help people who are doing awesome things in education move it forward. And whether that means helping them with strategy or helping them with marketing or building a website, all of that is just the vehicle for the more important piece of actually impacting those kids. And if I were to pick a final goal, it would be to create a trauma-safe environment inside of there, of how the educators are interacting with the kiddos and how, the culture of it is my end focus. But I find that these other pieces are kind of a good way in. And then you can build trust by helping them complete their tangible tasks and then get into, the bigger issues that take longevity and understanding to kind of meet.
You snowball in a way.
Do I snowball? Oh, I do. Yes. Yeah, I thought you were saying you snowballed, like you.
No. You snowballed in quality of what you were saying too. The more you're talking, the better it even got too.
Excellent.
Yes. And that guy that you mentioned honestly sounded like he probably got that idea from Gary Vee. He's been spewing it out for a decade now. The guy I'm talking about. And it's interesting too, because there's a tool that I mention a lot to people is Notion.so. In fact, there was a couple of times today where I wanted to sneak it in because I love it so much. In fact, you saw it earlier when I was showing you my notes for you. And the thing is about it, it allows you to organize all the stuff you're doing. And so you're mentioning how marketing, you kind of implied as marketing is just an end goal. Like it's a byproduct of the end goal. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah. And I use Notion as a tool to organize all that so that way I can focus on what I'm doing later on and actually focus on the most important thing. I don't remember what my point was for that whole situation, so I'm just going to move on. But so next question here, what do you think of lifelong learning?
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with it. I mean, I already told you I pretty much walk around with a headphone in my ear 24/7. And I think that comes from, I mean, that's what we want to build in our students. Is not, learning is not this chore of just sitting in a classroom and being taught at. It's experiential. I mean, you can learn from anything. You can learn from anything. And I think that's huge in early education, right? In early education, we are really good at understanding that, hey, a child can learn from play. They learn from interaction. They learn from rolling the dump truck up the hill and then letting it roll down. I mean, they learn from all those pieces. And then for some reason, when that kid turns 6, people are like, you know, this kid only learns from worksheets and textbooks.
Right.
Well, I don't know what book they're reading, but that's not how the brain works.
Yeah.
So experiential learning is still a thing, even when they go to kindergarten. And so I think taking these early childhood principles that for some reason people are starting to understand and absorb more readily, and extending them through and making learning this experience that you can gain from so many different places is what creates lifelong learners. So I'm obsessed with it, but allowing kids to see it as more than just sitting in a classroom writing in a book lets them see it out in the world, you know, more readily. I mean, my girls are like that all the time. We were at the dog park yesterday and there were like 27 dogs there. It was dog heaven. I'm just sitting there and like, kiss me, love me, I love you. We're amazing. We're best friends. But the girls were there and they're counting the dogs and then they're graphing. They had rocks out and they were like graphing, you know, there's 10 fluffy ones and two spotted ones and whatever. And to me, that's a bigger, they're going to learn more from that. It's going to go into deep memory way more than if I handed them a worksheet and sat in there. So I think experiential learning is the tie to that lifelong learning, which is all student-centered. Student-centered.
Yeah. Well, Chelsea, you mentioned earlier your daughter is doing that dragon project and building a dragon in Minecraft. And Minecraft is a perfect example of being an education tool. There's actually some schools that actually use it for education for a reason. And the thing is, I don't know the exact point that I was making, but I was listening to a video the other day. I was talking about how when people are playing a game, even if they fail, like they're bound to fail. You have to fail actually to play it. So the first 5 minutes, you're going to get killed and knocked down. Okay, well, fine. Kids and gamers are much more resilient to that because we know it's a game. We're going to go back into it. So as soon as you die, you don't just quit and move away. You go back in and try again. Okay, this time you last 10 minutes, you die, you try again, you go back. Literally last night, I actually had my cousin play Spider-Man. Literally, like the game we mentioned earlier, and he died like 2 times against a boss. Well, guess what? He didn't just quit; he went right back into it and played it again. And it's that resilience that you learn from that, and on top of that too, the new pathways you're learning from, like, okay, you do this button, it does this action, and then you combine the buttons to do this action, and so it makes a much bigger experience.
Yeah, I mean, they're having to connect those pieces and hold on to, well, I died when I jumped off this side, but if I jump on this side, right? And so they're having to recall as they're going through the level, these are the things that didn't work, and then actively change what they're doing to get to the end. And I think that's a type of, experiential problem solving in a way that they don't get on a regular day. And so that game experience is huge. When my daughters first started playing Minecraft, they hated it. I am awful at Minecraft. Like,
I don't like to do that, honestly.
I can't handle it. It's too slow for me. I don't like having to mine and then ore, and I just don't like it. And so I think having that opportunity to fail and die and reevaluate and having to do it on the fly and over and over and over and regulate your emotions, I mean, it's a whole experience that's valuable. And so on that tangent, my brother and I, who's a super nerd too, when he lived in Colorado, we used to go up there and play Lego Batman on his Xbox, which I'm pretty sure is built for like 5th graders. And we were so bad at it. And it has so many different like variables, and maybe you need to wear this mask or this suit, or maybe you jump over there and the characters have to work together. And, like,
Lego Star Wars is the same way too.
Seriously. I mean, I'm pretty sure we should have been 2 adults who were like, we're failing at Lego Batman. So we would have to YouTube, how do we get through this level? Yeah. Anyway, so our thing became, when something is harder than it should be, we're like, Lego Batman. And so I actually have this little Lego guy.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So he sits on my desk and he's kind of the reminder of when some things should be simple, but it's actually really hard. We're like Lego Batman. But I think having to start over and do it over and over again, even when you're dying and even when you're frustrated, can teach skills that would be more challenging to learn in the real world.
Yeah. Well, and continue on this tangent, Nintendo's really good about finding games or making gimmicks for games that are conducive to having fun and play. And that's what there's their ethos, so to speak.
Right.
And one of their newest games that came out a couple years ago, Breath of the Wild, which is a Zelda game, famous series. I've played almost all of them throughout my life, but Breath of the Wild is unique because it's open world, which is something that's pretty common with most games, but unique to that series. It's the first real one that's like that. And the thing is, it has systems in the game. So when you go to a tree, you have a torch, you hold up the torch to the tree, it goes on fire, which most games don't have that normal physics, so to speak. They actually spent a long time developing this game because they were developing these systems. Like if you're having a metal sword and it starts to rain and if the lightning hits you, you have that metal sword, you have to put it away so that way you don't get lightning struck. But you also can do that with combat. So for example, there's enemies in the game, you can throw the sword at them and it electrocutes them. Or if you have an electric weapon, you can electrocute them in the rain. It does more damage, stuff like that. Those are systems that you have to figure out. The game doesn't explicitly tell you. And my little sister, she was 10 at the time. I was teaching her how to play this game. She got so frustrated. She was scared of the monsters. And I'm like, she's a gamer. I know she is. I know she's a gamer. So you just got to I kept trying to push it to her. And she would try to play the game. She finally bought it herself recently, actually, and started playing it again. So it makes me proud. But at this time, she was not wanting to play it because it seemed too difficult. But every time she tried, she got back up and tried again. She got a little bit farther. She realized, I could do it this way. I could sneak in and attack them, and I can do it much more effective that way. Okay, cool. And there's so many different ways to approach a problem in this game, which is really unique. I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's why we need video game people to come and help us with education.
Actually, I had to take a note on my Modular Degree Notion page where I was like, okay, get the game designers for the Modular Degree.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, they're already doing it. We just need to take that concept and put it over in education.
Yeah, and there was actually another little tangent that I almost forgot, and I'm glad I didn't, is that you and I are both really obsessed with lifelong learning, and I love that, and I think that you and I are becoming friends because of that. But the one thing is, we might be obsessed with it, but it takes time to get used to it. And I don't want our obsession to make people think that it's that hard. You could start off small and build it up and snowball it. And I just want to make that distinction because there's certain aspects, like we talked about speed reading and listening to videos at a higher speed. That's hard to do at first. I actually converted my roommate into doing it a little bit because he had watched videos with me. And I'm like, I can't watch this at 1x speed.
I cannot watch that.
Me and him will watch Netflix and I have to stop after 30 minutes because I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I literally can't. Because
too slow.
Yeah, Netflix actually on the phone can do higher speed now. So I watch my shows at 1.5. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that.
Yeah, and for some reason, it's not on the TV. It's only on the phone.
No.
Why? Come on, Netflix, get on our level.
Yeah, come on now.
That makes me all nerdy. So, what is a catalyst for change?
I think relationship. I mean, and that's always what my thing when I was preaching at my teachers, when I was directing, was everything we do goes through the filter of relationship and collaboration. If you're not collaborating with the child or building a relationship, then you're missing out because, the activity, say you're doing an art project or a science project or whatever, the activity is the container for the relationship. So the relationship is the goal, the discussion that comes with it, the questions that the educator is asking, extension questions, tying it to experiences, all of that. That's the focus. The product of the science project, the art project is not the focus, right? So it's the process, not the product. We already talked about it's the journey, not the destination. And so I think one big thing that we focused on when I was directing, and one big thing that I see happening in schools that are killing it, is relationship. They're focused on the relationship of the student with the educator or the culture or whatever more than the product. And so I think a huge catalyst is having that shift from we want to make sure our science fair has lots of pretty projects to what kind of relationships were built during the process of building these projects, and tying those pieces together, which ties all of it together, right? Holistic education, experiential learning, relationships, resiliency, which comes from relationships, all those pieces are tied together. I mean, we were built for community.
Yeah.
Me, not all the time, because people sometimes I need to go play Sims because I can control it, right? And I can just mute the other person and it just brings me, it fulfills me. And then I'm ready to go back out and not be able to control people again.
Yeah.
But no, I think relationship is that catalyst.
Well, and Sims also is another good example of a video game that really teaches you a lot of life lessons as well, too. It also makes things, if you get really meta, it actually makes our life really weird too. It's like, oh, we have to go to the bathroom. Okay, great. That's a problem we have to have. Oh, we sleep 1/3 of our life. Well, crap. How do we take advantage of the rest of our life? Well, we work another third. And so it really puts it in perspective too.
Yeah, and I have a hard time with that because I've been playing Sims for forever because that's my nerd thing. As I love Sims, I love being in control of it. But anyway, you can speed it up. Yeah. And so I find myself, sitting during the day or driving to work. I'm like, where's the 3 times button?
Yeah.
How do I make this go faster?
What's really funny is that I like to play a lot of emulators, which, just for note for someone listening in, I have the games that I'm playing. Like, technically emulators are fine, but the ROMs can be illegal if you don't own the games themselves. I own the games. And there's a game that I would play, and a Pokemon game of all things, and you can speed it up. And it makes me so happy because some of the older games especially are very slow. You walk at a single square space at a time, where you could press a fast forward button and now you're zipping along the screen. Or in the battle where it's literally text rolling across the screen like this speed, literally this speed, over and over again. Okay, attack this. It did this. That's how fast it's going the entire time. And I changed the settings to fast too, no less. But if you put the speed up button, it just goes fast and you can just get through a battle much more quickly. So you grind a lot quicker, which is a lot more satisfying.
Yeah.
You get to the fun parts quicker. Yeah.
Right. What are we here for? What's the purpose?
Yeah. So you recently moved to a full-time consulting role. And for people listening in, what are the areas you tend to help people in?
Well, I think I touched on that before when I was answering another one of the questions. Yeah. But so the school, the school I was directing closed due to Corona, and it was we made the choice to. So we're, as we've talked about, we're experiential, hands-on, relationship-based, collaborative culture, and all those things. And we could have gone back and done it halfway with the regulations, but we would not have been able to go back in our full model. And so for us, it was we either do it all the way or we don't do it. And so we wouldn't have been able to reopen as we wanted. And so we decided to close, which I got myself right out of a job. Yeah. But principles, right?
Right, exactly.
But since then, I've, just been hanging out with people and trying to find things that are awesome and helping them move forward. And I think I touched on it earlier, but it's looked like all kinds of different things. I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, can you help us research where to find pre-service training for educators? Or can you review this that we're doing? Or can you work with us on building our strategy? Or, hey, we're looking at having a website, those types of things. And my goal is really, like I said, not to be a website developer because I'm not a full stack developer. If you want fancy schmancy, you don't want me, right? I can make it pretty.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of tools that allow you to make it pretty that actually make a functional website.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've always used Wix. And then when Wix added developer tools, I can do some code and make it, I can make a nice website, but I'm not, if you want full stack developer, that's not me. Right. And so it was I actually had a conversation with a client who was looking at having me build their website. And we kind of got into a conversation and I was saying, my end goal is not to be a marketing firm. I don't want to build websites for a living. I want to further education and the vehicle for that. And they didn't understand. They didn't understand. They wanted me to, succeed financially. But I wanted to make education awesome, but also succeed financially. But I think all that to say, my goal is not to be a strategy and operations designer or a website designer or a marketing, whatever. Those are the vehicles for moving education forward, if that makes any sense at all. This is why I can't market whatever it is that I do. Well,
and actually that brings me to a tangent I probably did forget earlier, is trying to help you with that per se, because that's the point of the show. I want to exemplify the polymathic traits that you have. And so the audience here, I would hope, would understand you much better than most people. If you go to a different show, I've been on plenty of shows. There's plenty of chances where I'm like, oh, I can only talk about one thing. They only confine me to one thing. There's been a couple shows where I finally felt open enough, and the host was keeping up enough to where we were able to talk about all the different areas that I wanted to talk about. Hopefully you get that experience coming on here too.
Yeah.
And when it comes to marketing yourself, it seems like that's your point. It's like you might have to do those small little things like creating your website, helping somebody with Facebook ads, or helping somebody create content or do a podcast here and there. And those might be a means to an end, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the PolyInnovator website, I've been trying to change it so much to make it simple for people, because the Polymath itself is a weird concept. People don't understand that. I literally made documentation to try to help people with that.
Right.
And then on top of that, okay, well, I do education. Well, I'm an exercise expert as well. So my next phase is going to be about exercise. Well, I'm also a gamer. I want to do gaming too.
Yeah.
And those concepts aren't even on the website just yet. It's just the education and self-development aspect. Mm-hmm. But even going on there, people get confused. And so trying to market yourself is something I'm challenging myself to do better as well. But what I've learned is just trying to make it more like a journey. And so if you have a website, start here, explain one concept, get them to a new page, explain one concept, and move it on.
Yeah. And that's hard.
Yeah. Another thing is too, is like, a couple of my guests have talked about this COVID resolution, so to speak. And I only think that we're about halfway through the pandemic. People might disagree with me, but for what I'm seeing is that we're not going to get out of this anytime soon. And it's good to take advantage of this opportunity. Yes, it sucks. Many people have died. There's a lot of stuff going on, but we have a lot of opportunity. We're able to have this conversation because of it. You might have been too busy during this time had things have been normal, if you will.
Yeah.
I started out really early, but even if you start now, like I said, we're only about halfway through. And we talked about how many interviews you've been on, and who knows how many more you'll be on too. Matchmaker's been really prolific for a lot of my work there too. So hopefully that helps you out a lot. Maybe down this line, this time will help you organize what you're trying to give out and maybe clarify your message as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people I've heard talking about, they lost their job, which I'm in one of those realms, with the ability to pursue their dream, which they would have never pursued, right? I mean, I've wanted to do this. I built my website like 3 years ago. Well, I mean, kind of built, right? I mean, I started it, the concept, I bought the host, I did all of that 3 years ago because this was kind of what I wanted to do. This was my goal. But I would have never, I mean, I say I would have never, but in my mind, I probably would have never walked away from the school I was at just willy-nilly to go and do this. One, because, money.
Yeah.
So that's a thing.
Right.
And, and
I'm
two,
still
because,
struggling to pay bills. It's
right.
hard.
Yeah. And two, because I was good at it. I had a great team. We were growing. I mean, there was no real reason to walk away, and I probably wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And so this is a forced opportunity, as I like to call it, that I might not have had before. And so I'm having to kind of remind myself of this is my chance to do something that I've always wanted to do and may not have done had I been still successful in the role that I was.
Yeah. And something else we've talked about on the show a lot is COVID has been an accelerant for change. Oh, yeah. And Zoom is a prime example where Skype and Zoom were basically the same, although Zoom actually has slightly better recording options, so to speak. But regardless, they were basically the same. Skype was top dog for the longest time, but they weren't able to pivot when COVID hit. Zoom sacrificed security at the beginning to scale up their infrastructure. Yes, there was a whole security debacle about it, but they had to scale up or else they wouldn't be able to handle all the incoming people that joined their platform at the beginning of the
entire nation.
Yeah, literally. And I don't like Zoom. There's plenty of better recording tools for these shows. Right. It records at 25 frames per second, which is not the most ideal when it comes to online video. And it's actually very low resolution, which I don't like. I'm a very detail-oriented person when it comes to that. I want high resolution. I want our faces to look really crisp, okay? But the problem is it's the best option for me right now, financially at least. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm going to use it. But they grew exponentially because it happened so quickly. They were going to grow anyways. They were making better decisions than Skype was. Same with Amazon, same with some of these other tools like Netflix and Grubhub and Fresh Eats, or whatever the term is for that delivery service. Tools were going to grow if you look at the next 10 years, but because of COVID, they exponentially grew. They accelerated.
I think you and forced opportunities.
Exactly. But that's the thing too, I was going to mention, you and I both had that same situation where we didn't want to leave our roles. I was a personal trainer and water instructor, swim instructor. I still am, but I want to leave Columbia. Or where I live. I'm probably going to cut that part out. I want to leave where I live. And it's one of those things where in order to do so, I have to quit what I'm doing, at least temporarily. And I don't know if I would have done that had I not been kind of kicked out. I lost my job temporarily because of the situation.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I've found that people are less risk adverse because we're all so exhausted with all the decisions and everything changing, keeping up with it. Conversations that people may have snubbed off before, people are actually willing to have.
Yeah.
because they're now all experiencing these struggles with things as they are. And so now I can come to people and say, hey, have you thought about what does it look like to create a trauma-informed environment? And whereas before they might have said, we don't need that. Now it's well known that we're all experiencing collective trauma.
Yeah.
So people are willing to say, okay, tell me more about what a trauma-informed environment looks like. And that's giving me the opportunity to, unfortunately, to bring in what should have been there before. And really, my passion would be to create a trauma-informed environment. How do we do that for schools? And for better or for worse, we are now all collectively traumatized.
Yeah.
So no one can say we don't have trauma here.
Well, and I was talking to someone literally about this 2 days ago, where 2 years from now, when COVID's finally taken care of, and there'll still be around probably, but like we have vaccines, so we're able to take care of ourselves. Right. It's still gonna be like, if someone coughs or sneezes near you, you're gonna kind of jump a little bit. You're gonna get a little concerned. You're still gonna see people wearing masks a couple years from now, because they're gonna be they slow to change. Like on the bell curve, they're gonna be they slow to adapt, and they're gonna be like, okay, well, are you sure we're safe at that point? There's gonna be people like us who are like, okay, now we're safe. We don't have to wear masks. And there's gonna be people in the main crowd who are like, okay, we'll wait till the early adopters do it.
Right. Let the other people get sick first, and then we'll totally.
So what are some of the things that are coming up for you in the future, and what do you want to work on?
I actually had a conversation with someone yesterday about how we bring this trauma-informed concept we present it to people, how we're presenting it to people, and using that, the end of now we're all collectively traumatized. Okay, now how do we talk about that? And kind of normalizing mental health inside of education and that holistic view. It all ties back. We've already talked about all those things. But so the conversation yesterday was, okay, so he was saying, if I gave you a platform and I gave you people, what would you say? And I was like, something great, I'm certain, And so for me, what's really hard for me and what I'm hoping to work on is I am great on the spot. I love just having conversations and talking about it and bringing it up, and then we plan about it, or I help you with what's going on or whatever. But people are like, hey, Chelsea, can you create content? Can you write a workbook, whatever? And I'm like, no.
Yeah, I've tried that myself too. It doesn't work.
It's really hard. Yeah. And so that's where I'm struggling. And that's what I'm hoping to do, is to be able to, give something tangible out instead of living at 30,000 feet and saying, here's all the things we need to do, here's what we need to do, and here's how we need to bring holistic education, blah, blah, and making it down to ground level and saying, okay, here's the 5 steps you can take today to see this progress. And I have that in my brain, but getting it out onto paper is a lot harder.
First off, screw paper, do a video. But secondly, you can also transcribe the video and make that into paper. And so some people like literally get like ghostwriters, for example. Gary Vee, who I mentioned earlier, is not a writer. He knows he's not a writer, but he can make a video like us right off the fly. I noticed that even though you're not as used to doing interviews, you've been doing very well this interview. You've been able to talk on these answers, even if I didn't even ask a good question. I didn't phrase it right. You were able to take the answer and go off the cuff really well. So good on you for that. Yay. And in fact, there's someone I wanted to mention, Aaron Smith. He wrote a book called Blank Check. If you had a blank check to change education, particularly K through 12, how would you do it? I had him on the show. I think you and him would actually get along really well. We matched on Matchmaker too, mind you. So you might be able to find him on there. But if you were to like interview him or talk to him one day and just talk questions and ask him things, you could probably make a video out of that pretty easily, because you and him both would just resonate really well. Like we have. And so maybe that's your path there.
Yeah, that's what I did my very first podcast interview like last week, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed the experience of it. And this too. And so, I don't know. And that's, it's just hard. It's all hard. And everybody says you should do something different. Like, oh, you have to sell a product, or, oh, you need to sell a course, or, oh, you need to do. And I'm like, I don't want to do any of that. I just want to save the children.
Content, though. Yeah. But and even if you don't want to, it might come more naturally after you already create stuff. It took me forever. Even though I love being on camera now, I love being in front of center stage in front of people. I love improvising like you. I didn't do videos until a year after starting podcasts. And I actually don't do podcasts anymore. I just do Polycast. So this is your first Polycast too. So it's perfect. But it took me forever to get used to that. And so I think it's transition time is what I'm trying to say. Some people don't like podcasts because they don't like hearing the sound of their own voice. And it's one of those things where it just takes time to get used to it. And I think that for you, for course, it might be the same thing too.
Yeah.
Not to sound too know-it-all or anything like that, but
no, I need a couple know-it-alls because, you know, everybody has a different opinion about what you should do.
Right. Well, Chelsea, what is something you've never said or talked about that you secretly wanted to?
I mean, I already told you about the hitman.
True. So thank you for that sharing.
Dropping out of school.
Yeah.
But you know, so I said this on this is kind of like, I usually only start stating this feeling that I have when I talk with people that I know and they know me well enough to be able to kind of delineate what I'm saying, but I'll say it to you anyway.
Thank you.
And then I told this to the last friend that I was podcasting with. I was like, you can cut that part out if you feel like it's too offensive. But this is kind of my really brash basis for why I believe the things I do with mental health and trauma-informed education. So I believe that if you are interacting with a child, if you are choosing to be an educator or a coach or anything, you know, a parent, hopefully you chose that one, but you know, it's fine. If you are intentionally choosing that, then you need to intentionally make intentional moves and choices about how you're interacting with that child. And maybe, you know, I keep saying, I was saying like, read a book. If you don't know how to interact with that child in a healthy way to help make them feel safe and strong and resilient and grow and all of those things, read a book, you know, ask a question. Don't just do it thinking it'll be okay when they're getting more hurt. Like the Dalai Lama has a quote that says, if you can't help someone, at least don't hurt them. And that's kind of my theory with educators and parents and all of that. If you can't help that child in a positive way, in the very least, don't hurt them. Back up. You know, and so if my big thing is if you can't do it right, then don't do it. Because especially for children that have experienced trauma, so like foster children or adoptive children or all children now at this point, people have different triggers and it's hard to understand what that means. And no person, parent, educator is perfect. I mean, I obviously am not, and no one is going to interact with a child in a perfect way all the time, but we can do it in an intentional way. So what I really like, what gets under my skin is when someone's like, oh, I like kids, you know, I can hang out with them, but no one gives them any tools about how to engage with that child. If that child gets overwhelmed, what are you going to say to them? Because what you say to them is key to how that moves forward or regresses. And so it's so simple, but it's not focused on. And so my soapbox is either do it right or get out of the way.
Well, a lot of philosophy is simple, but it's not always well understood simply. And that's kind of what you're saying there. That's interesting, Chelsea. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, I think this was the conversation that I had yesterday, and it was actually with a church leader about, you know, volunteers that are interacting with kids on a Sunday morning. And so those volunteers, especially in a church environment, their job is to reflect Christ to these kids, right? They want to be a reflection of what they're teaching them about. And then also with teachers, they're wanting to reflect positive relationships and positive education. And so it's so simple in how you engage. So for example, if you have a trauma-informed environment and the educators or the volunteers or whoever are given the tools about how to respond. So very practically, if a child is freaking out, right? Say that you give them a math problem and they panic and they throw their paper off the desk and they're like, I can't do this, it's too hard, blah, blah, right? The way that you respond is going to change that environment. So typically the response would be, this is not okay. You are being disrespectful. Go pick up your paper, sit at the table and complete the work because I told you to, right? I mean, that's a typical response. The child does it because, well, we assume as an adult, the child does it because we told them to do it. Well, we're not validating what they're feeling. Right. So I'm not saying we allow children and students to be disrespectful and, you know, all this chaos. But I am saying that they're going to have emotions. They're going to feel responses. And so in some way, validating that and then helping them understand it and recover from it. So I've talked about two different forms of resilience. I wrote an article called Excessive Resilience, and it kind of breaks into this concept of resilience. People sometimes define resilience as being able to get over something, right? You had a crappy childhood, get over it. right? That's resilience. Well, that's not really resilience. That's passivity. That's just go around it. We're not really going to deal with it. We're just going to kind of go around it. And so resilience in its truest form is being able to, you come up against an obstacle, you see it, you understand it, you figure out how to get over it, and then you get over it in a way that you can look back and learn from what happened. That's true resilience. And that's what we want to allow children to understand in a trauma-informed environment. So we understand that they've experienced something, they're going to have reactions, we're going to react to their reactions in a healthy way to co-regulate, and then allow them to, at some point, look back on what happened, learn from it, and rebuild, right? There's building those neural pathways. So instead of telling that child, sit down, do your work because I told you to do it or whatever, your response might be, hey, can you please pick up your paper? Let's talk about what's going on, right? I mean, you draw a line, you want them to be respectful, but you also validate that they're feeling a feeling. Hey, what's going on? And they might say, I can't do this. This is too hard. I can't believe you're making me do this. And your response is not, oh, you can do it. Because maybe they can't. Maybe they have dysgraphia. Maybe they have dyslexia. Maybe they have any type of learning differences that doesn't allow them to perceive what's going on the way that you're perceiving it. And I think that's a big thing, is to understand that their perception of what's going on is not yours, dependent on their life experiences and any differences they have in learning, which every child has a difference in learning. And so you sit down with them and say, how are you feeling? Okay, now you threw your paper on the ground. Did that help us move forward, or are we still stuck here? And their response might be, yeah, I mean, it didn't really help me solve the problem. Right. Okay. And of course, this conversation needs to happen after they've come back to executive function, because when they're throwing the paper on the ground and crying or whatever, they've gone to their amygdala and you are not going to make any progress.
The lower
right?
mind,
Yeah. I mean, so you got to give them a chance to figure it out. And then just talking them through it. I'm so sorry. I went on a whole tangent. So
no, that's perfect. That's what I wanted. I tried. That's why I had that question there, because it's tangent bait, and I think that going meta like that on these shows is where the meat of the episode comes in. So thank you for that. And I think that it's interesting too, because calming down somebody is something hard. You have to teach them to breathe and teach them like it's okay. A good example I wanted to share with you is that I'm a swim instructor, and sometimes people think, oh, it's too hard, I can't hold my breath that long, or something like that. And I know from experience that you can. I know you can, like at this point. Like I know that's kind of being overly didactic at that point, but there's certain signs that you can tell, like, okay, you can do that. It's just your brain says you can't. And there's a point where you have to look at their psychology, like, okay, they're in that amygdala state, they're in that lower emotional mind. This goes back to the 4 pillars that I mentioned earlier, understanding their emotions and picking up on that and getting them back into that executive function, getting them back to the point like, okay, I can focus on this. I can do this. I had a 4-year-old who says, oh, this is too tricky. I can't do it. And that's her way of saying, oh, I don't want to do things because it's too tricky. Even though it's not tricky. It's just, that's the way she explains it. And the difficulty is just a matter of opinion, not necessarily actual fact. And so once you get past that mental block, you actually, oh, I can do it. And it's a nice positive outcome.
Yeah. When you help them get through it, and then they recognize that they validate how they feel. It's okay to have emotions. And then they can look back at that and use that as a tool for the next time they feel that way.
Yeah. Precedence. And so kind of wrapping up here, where can people find you online if they want to talk to you more?
LinkedIn is my favorite because, there's less drama there, I find. So LinkedIn is my favorite. And then I have a website.
I'll make sure I have links in the description for you so that people can find you. I just like to have that verbal confirmation in case someone's listening in. So what do you think will be the call to action for the audience today?
This goes back to me just wanting to save the children. It's really just, I am looking to partner with anybody who's moving education forward. And, in any way that I've had people just call me and say, hey, here's the things that I'm doing. Is there something you feel like you could pick up and help us with? And that's how I've actually gotten a lot of the people that I'm working with, is just through conversation. So I've found that up until this point, I don't have a here, buy this package or buy this whatever. It's, hey, let's talk. So on my website, you'll see the book a discovery call or whatever it says. And it's more of just, hey, let's talk about what you're doing. And if there's any way that I can partner with you and help moving that forward.
I love that. And then one way I like to ask this too is like, instead of just a call to action, what is a call to growth for the audience to do?
I think making it bite-sized is cool. And I think also making it relevant to you. I mean, so like we talked about earlier, if someone says you need to learn this and this is the book you need to read, then I usually say, okay, what am I supposed to get from that book? I don't like that book. Let's try this one.
Yeah.
And so feeling free to advocate for yourself and how you learn, and then taking it one piece at a time and not judging yourself too harshly, which I'm working on that one.
Yeah, same actually. Trust me, same. So once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Chelsea Robberson on the Polymath Polycast. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was.